Okay, I am Virginia Smith. My friends call me Jenny, so you can call me Ginny. And I'm going to be the moderator. And what I want to do is I want all three of us to introduce ourselves. Give us the 1 or 2 line bio, and then just one word, because we're going to talk about it a lot. Are you a pantser or a plotter? So I am a novelist. I write mostly cozy mysteries. My 35th book came out in November. But I've also written in a variety of genres, so we're going to talk about that. I've written romance, I've written romantic suspense, I've written historical romance, and a bunch of stuff like that. But my claim to fame and the reason I'm here really is because I love fantasy, even though I'm not allowed to write fantasy, or they don't pay me to write fantasy. But I am on the board of directors for the World Fantasy Convention, which is coming to Salt Lake City in 2020. So ask me about that. That one's really cool. But I want to hear from these ladies.
My name is Holly Kelly. I am a mom who writes books in her spare time, which is like hiding in the bathroom with my computer. I am the author of the Rising series. It's a 4-book series done pretty well about mermaids and Greek mythology. I'm also published a series called The Unnatural States of America, which is a series about like United States folklore in the Americas. So that's about me.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, I am a pantser. I tried plotting one time.
I am Wendy Nikel, and I have had published this series of time travel novellas. So those are over in the dealer room. And I also write short fiction, and I have some novels that I'm still trying to find homes for. And I am a plotter, or I am a pantser who is gradually becoming more of a plotter.
I call you a hybrid.
Yes.
I think I'm a hybrid too, because some genres, I was just telling, some genres does everybody know what pantser is? Okay, all right, let's start by defining that. The term comes from a seat of the pants writer. So that's somebody that just sits down, and you might have an idea of how you're starting, and you may have an idea of how it ends, but you just start writing, and you discover the story and the characters as you're going along. So you're writing by the seat of your pants. They call them pantsers. And obviously a plotter is someone who spends time plotting the book before you start. And I'm a hybrid too, because if I'm writing romance or something that is more character driven, I'm a pantser, but if I'm writing a mystery, I'm a plotter. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So I want to hear, what is your process when you're first starting a book? Tell me how you go about it.
I start with a character. So basically, I think, like my very first book that I had published, my idea was like, what would happen if a mermaid were born on land, but she didn't know she was a mermaid? She just thought she was horribly deformed. And so from there, I just had that idea in my head, and I didn't have really anything else planned, no other characters planned, not even because it was a romance. I didn't really know who she was going to fall in love with. I just started writing.
Okay, so I am a huge fan of National Novel Writing Month. Raise your hand if you're national. So that was how I got into novel writing. It was something that I had heard about. Someone had told me about it, and I was like, I'll bet I could do that. And so that's how I got started into writing novels. And so that's kind of my base where I'm coming from. That was the only way. I had started novels before, and I had always heard, from high school teachers and, professors that the way to write a story is to outline, and to have your outline and follow your outline. And so I would have this outline, and then I would get, a couple thousand words into it, 10,000 words into it, and I would be so bored because I knew exactly what was coming next. And so NaNoWrimo worked really well for me. because I jumped right into it. I think it was like November 4th that I heard about it. You know, people were talking about this cool, you know, National Novel Writing Month, and I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I didn't have anything at all. I just knew, like, this is you know, I've always wanted to write a time travel story. So that was my, like, big idea of, okay, I'm gonna sit down here and write a time travel story. And so that is where I'm coming from. And now that I have more experience and have worked through more manuscripts, I'm coming to appreciate plotting a lot more, because you don't end up with as many of those like saggy middles, and if you get stuck, you kind of have a guideline or a map to show you, okay, where do I need to go from here?
I think that's a really good point. When I write a mystery, I spend a lot of time up front. I mean, I know I can tell you guys exactly how many scenes in each chapter I'm going to have, who the viewpoint character in each chapter is, and what the chapter hook is going to be, and I have it all laid out, and you know, all the red herrings I'm gonna. And so when I sit down in the morning, well, the first thing I do, because I do everything they tell you not to do, I edit what I wrote the day before, because I edit as I go along. And then I know exactly what I'm going to write. So if you are a pantser, how do you face that blinking cursor? Do you ever have a problem knowing what comes next?
I do what you do. I write and then I go back and edit what I do. And then once I kind of edit enough, I'll usually get the idea of, okay, this is what I want to happen next. And then I'll write a chapter at a time and then go back through and tweak things and fix things. And so, yeah, that's my process.
Okay.
And that's one of those things that I have learned more over the years of doing Nanowrimo. So I start the day with my writing and I get all my words in, and then basically as I'm going about my day doing my normal stuff, I am planning in the back of my head, okay, what comes next? What has to come next? What would the characters do next? What is the next major plot point that I need to get to? So that then when I sit down the next morning, I at least know where I'm going and what I want to accomplish in the next chapter.
Okay, but all right now, so if you don't have a plot and you don't, you know, how do you keep track of all those details? I mean, because you've got to know, I mean, we all know, if we're all writers, we know that as you're going through the story, your characters do unexpected things, little twists will happen. How do you remember so you don't leave all of these loose ends tied up or untied?
That's part of me going back and fixing things. When I go back over it all the time, I remember pretty much everything. So yeah, that's what I do.
It might be a factor of age. I don't remember anything.
Well, I actually have a really terrible memory for some things and really good memory for other things.
Okay.
So yeah, and I have ADHD too, which makes it so I can't stick to stuff. I just kind of have to, keep moving.
I get one of those nice little compact spiral notebooks from the Dollar Tree for each and every manuscript I write, and I have it by my computer so that when I get to chapter 14 and I realize, oh, that character was already in this place and now they're at another place at the same time and that's not going to work, I can jot it down to have myself go over and fix it later.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, and I'm going to describe my work of art. And you guys, I'm not kidding, I have this Excel spreadsheet that is a work of art. It is like a beautiful thing. And because my background before I became a writer was I was a computer programmer and then an implementation program manager. So I like a plan, okay? So my spreadsheet, and this is how I plot. My spreadsheet has a timeline, and then it has, scene 1, scene 2, end of chapter, and at the end of every day, it has this little section over here where I record the ending word count. and it calculates how many words I've written that day, and how many are in this scene, and how many are in this chapter as opposed to this chapter, and it's color-coded by viewpoint character, so you can look down here, and if I'm writing, I'm serious, and if I'm writing it, and I have too many greens, I'll say, oh my gosh, I haven't shown anything from the hero's viewpoint, I better get a red in there. So, I mean, at a glance, it is a beautiful work of art. And on the next page, I have a list of the characters' names, and their eye color, because mine tend to change color. and then dates, the dates are really important because, like I was, if you're gearing up to a party on so and such a date, I have to keep that in mind because it's 3 days till the party, and it's 2 days till the party. So, I have a tool that is a beautiful thing, and I use it every single book that I write. I have all of them for 36 of them because I just finished one. So, what tools do you use?
I just use Word, and I kind of back it out. I shrink it down to 10% so I can see pretty much my whole manuscript in these little tiny windows, and I color code the wording.
Oh,
so
really?
I'll do kind of a reddish pink for my female protagonist. I'll do blue for my male protagonist. I'll do orange for my antagonist, and so I can kind of see, okay, ooh, this person's hogging most of the book. I need to go back in and put something in there. So that's what I do, but I do it after I pretty much have written it. But then so I'm I do things kind of backwards. So I write it, and then I'll figure out what I've written.
You are such a pantser.
So, two of the story structure templates that I've found to be really useful over the years have been the Save the Cat and the Hero's Journey. And they each break the story down into an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And each of them has certain beats that need to be hit. So, one is the inciting incident. It needs to take place at about this percentage of the way through the book. And so what I did for my spreadsheet is I have Save the Cat on one side and Hero's Journey on the other, and I have set up in the spreadsheet so that if I put up on the top the target word count and then put underneath it how many words I want approximately per chapter, it'll then come up with, okay, so you're looking to have your midpoint, the midpoint reveal where this thing happens is going to be at about chapter whatever. And since I tend to write one chapter a day, I can just look ahead and see, okay, you know what, I've got 3 chapters before I get to this. I have some setting up to do that I need to figure out. So I actually have that if you go to my website, so wendynikel.com, just one word, and then do /LTUE 2019. I actually have a link there to a Dropbox that you could download that and use that. Oh, but also, I just found out, I was over in the dealer room, and if you haven't stopped by the...
I'm going to talk about, yes, no, that's good, that's good. I'm going to talk about this.
If you haven't stopped by the plotter table, you should, because they gave me the pitch earlier today, and I'm going to buy it as soon as I get home, because that seems like an awesome tool that I am so excited about going and digging into that.
How many of you all have seen that plotter and tried it out? So, okay, just generally, what do you think? Yeah?
I've had it for a year.
Have you really? Okay. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I sat down and I looked at it because I knew I was going to be moderating this panel, and I'm like, okay, I need to know about this. And of course, I like new shiny technology. It's like, oh, look, I can just move that around. But that was actually going to be my next question, because my spreadsheet, the work of art that it is, one thing, and if you are a pantser and you don't like to plot, one thing I like about my spreadsheet is I am the queen of Excel, so I understand how to use spreadsheets. But as I'm typing, a lot of people say, I don't want to plot because I get bored, and I know exactly what's going to happen. But creativity happens as we're writing, you guys, and things crop up, and little questions will open up, and I don't want to forget those. So I can actually, and I do at the end of every day, I go into my spreadsheet, or even as I'm writing, go into my spreadsheet and insert a line and say, solve this one here, or at the bottom I say, don't leave this unsolved. And so it is a living, breathing thing, and that plotter software looked like it would do that as well. So it's kind of like my version of sticky notes, right? Because have you seen the storyboard with sticky notes, right? You have important points, you have your beats on a sticky note, you have a timeline, and you move them around. Well, I do that with my spreadsheet. So do you storyboard at all?
I do. I know. I tried like Scrivener.
Oh yeah.
I can't do it.
No, I can't.
The way with my ADHD, I have something called hyper focus. So I will kind of go into almost a trance while I'm writing. If you interrupt that, I've lost it. I don't even know what's happening next. So I have, once I'm in the story, I write. I'm in my character's head. I will think of things to kind of put, happen to my character, challenges and terrible things that can, that will go to the next. But yeah, I cannot pull myself out and analyze it. It just cripples me to do that. But I can go back and see what I've written and go, okay, I need to write a scene that has this in it. And so I can go back and I can go, okay, this is what has happened here. I need to do a scene here. And then I just start writing my scene and with a purpose. So, but yeah, I cannot plan it before.
Yeah, see, and I have my spreadsheet that I use as I'm going, so I only work like one day ahead at the most.
Oh, okay.
So I fill in the middle there. This is what's happening in this section. These are the subplots that we're working toward there. And then when I'm done, the first read through that I do is I go and not only do I write like a query letter type of pitch before I start revising, but then I go and fill in my spreadsheet and fill in any gaps, and you write an outline for it as well.
I'm glad you said that. That was going to be my next question. Now, I am at the point where I don't write a book unless I have a contract for it and I've been paid for it, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So when I am going to write a book and I want a new contract, I have to make a pitch, either through my agent or directly to an editor that I've worked with before. And many times when they go to acquisition, they want a proposal. So I have to write a summary, which is a kind of plot, right? So at this point in your career, how do you handle pitching new projects if you don't have an outline?
Well, I'm with a small publisher, and my books have done well enough that basically anything I bring to them, they'll pick up usually. So I don't really have to have the whole outline when I go in to write the book. And then I have also self-published a couple books. And so if they happen to not pick it up, I'll just, I'll get myself an editor and we'll work through it and get it published. But yeah, I usually don't have to do that.
And I usually do wait until I have at least that first draft. When I've worked with agents before, I have sometimes pitched, okay, this is the kind of story that I'm thinking of, but I'm not at the point yet where I can sell something just on whatever they call that.
Proposal.
On proposal, there you go, that's the word.
Yeah.
And without scaring anybody, proposals aren't, well, some publishers do require a chapter by chapter outline.
Yeah.
And those are, mysteries usually, but these are usually publishers that have not worked with you before, so they want to make sure you know what plot structure is and how to keep the forward momentum and make sure that you have the ending in mind before before they give you money for it. So yeah, but most of the time on proposal it's a summary, so it's not details, but it is, you do give away the ending. Yeah, you got to know the beginning, the middle, and the ending, and they have to judge that. So. Okay, you said something, and that I have to go back to, because part of my, I don't know, maybe I don't think I'm OCD or anything like that, but I cannot write out of sequence. I write the way a reader reads my book, so I write sequentially, and you said, well, I might have to go there, and then I might have to, so see, it seems to me like if you don't have a plot, then you're going to have to go back and do a lot of revisions and insertions and so on, so tell me about that.
Well, usually my problem is I have too many like high intensity scenes, too much together. So I'll go back and I'm like, okay, I need to give my readers a break here, and I need to do some more character development. So my first draft is always a working draft. I'm changing things all the time. But yeah, I write, like a lot of people will have to cut things at the end. I don't. The more I revise, I add to it. And so I have the main story out, and then I add to it, and it grows in number. And then when I feel like it's done, then usually it's at pretty much the right length. So yeah, that's.
Sorry, I guess I'm a bit unusual.
So my issue that I run into is that with doing Nanowrimo and discovery writing, my first act never ends up the same as Act 3. So my little notebook that has notes on things I need to go back and change, by the time I get to Act 3, it is full, and I pretty much have to go and rewrite a number of the first chapters. So that's kind of my, after I have that sloppy first draft, that tends to be my next step is, okay, now I need to go back and I need to fix all of those plot things that need tweaked and moved around, and so I do one revision pass that way, starting at the beginning, working my way to the end, and then I do another one with deepening the character and their emotions and that internal struggle, and then I go through one more time and make sure everything ends up really pretty.
And by the time you turn that sucker in, you hate those characters and want to drive a stake through their heart if you ever have to see them again, right?
Take breaks in between.
Take breaks in between. And when I first started writing the first several books, I would, and I do, if it's not a mystery, I do a lot of discovery writing. I write my first 3 chapters over and over and over again, because that's where I'm getting to know the characters, and and the one series I did, which is one of my favorites, is just small town, humorous, and so on. It's very character and setting driven instead of plot driven. So do you think that if you had to write something that was very, very plot different or plot centric, would you approach it differently?
I don't see how I could. I don't know what my characters are going to do at the beginning. I don't know. Really? I don't know their personality yet. So once I start writing them, their personality really comes out. And then, because I did try plotting once. I had a beautiful big plot. It was gorgeous. And I wrote my first chapter. And I had this idea. I'm like, oh, I would like this to happen instead. And so, but that was something that would take it on a completely different tangent. So I was determined to plot it. So I replotted the whole thing. It took me quite a while, because I'm like, okay, wrote the second chapter. The exact same thing happened. I'm like, I think this would be better. And so, I try and plot, and I can never stick to a plot, because the characters just go where they want to go for me.
Yeah, another name you might hear for pantsers is gardeners. I don't remember which author it was. Some author refers to them as gardeners, where you just kind of you lay out. First you prepare the ground, and that may be like the first couple of chapters, and then it's like, well, now I need to pick out what seeds are there. And then you kind of see what's growing up, and then you have to prune, and it is, the discovery writing, it's constantly changing the plot, which is another reason that I plot as I go, so that then there isn't stuff that I have to go back and rewrite or re-outline.
And I hate to tell you all this, but I don't ever do a revision, because I edit as I go along, and because I have an outline and a plot. When I type the end on the book, I send it to my editor, because I know it's solid. So that there is a difference in that, right? So and I can, when I do approach a book that I don't have a solid outline for, I do end up rewriting the beginning, sometimes multiple times, because the characters do change, and you get to the end, and something really dramatic happens to your character, and you think, this would be even better if at the beginning I had introduced a weakness here. So you go back and you do that, because it makes your books better, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There are often times that I will write my characters into a corner.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how am I gonna get them out of this? And so, you know, like my first book, it took me 3 weeks to figure out how to save them. But then once I figured it out, all I had to do is I had to go back and do a little bit of, you know, some changes that foreshadow, because I didn't want it to seem like it was, what is that called? When you have, yes, I didn't want it to feel like that. So I had to go back and I had to do a little bit of foreshadowing so people could see. And then it was funny because my reviewers were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you know, you planned this all out. It was like so brilliant how you had that solved. I'm like, yeah, it took a long time to figure out how to solve that.
One thing kind of going along with that I tend to do is leave myself breadcrumbs. So that's another page on my little notebook. Is I'll you know, infer things or refer to things or leave mysteries open of, like, you know, have someone mention, oh, but then, you know, there's this other thing that happened to her grandmother, you know, and that way when I end up toward the middle of the book and I'm like, what am I doing? Where are they going? What's going to happen from here? I can look back at my list and see, oh yeah, maybe I should connect that to that grandmother plot line, you know, that, I mean, it's easy enough that then if I don't end up using it, I can go back and wipe it out and it was never there to begin with. But then it does give me ideas as I go through of, okay, so what sort of clues have I left for the reader here that now I can go back and use for the story?
That's good. Yeah, I like that. You know, one of my friends that I was just talking to before this, I was talking about, you know, plotting versus pantsing, and I really like discovery writer. I never heard that term until I read it in the book here, you know. But you discover it. But anyway, she said that she had read somewhere that Roger Zelazny was a total pantser, never plotted anything out. I mean, think of some of the intricate books, and I mean, I think you guys are awesome because you can write really good books and not have them planned out. And, you know. Okay, we've still got about 20 minutes to go, but I want to know if anybody has any questions. Okay.
This is from my friend. He's a pantser, but like he also loses motivation when he has to go back and rewrite all these chapters. Like he's like, oh, I should have done this, or like you said, you have to overhaul all those chapters when you go back. How do you keep motivation and passion to do that when you have so much work that you have to go back and do?
So the question is, his friend's a pantser, but then he loses motivation when he has to go back and revise, and how do you keep that motivation? And I think not only motivate yourself, but you know, one of my favorite things to say is, if you don't love your story, you're not going to convince anybody else to love your story. So how do you keep yourself motivated and therefore the story tense, right?
I just love the process of creating just amazing, you know, well, I think they're amazing. You know. But,
of course you do. You love them, so they do too.
Yeah, so I love all the aspects of it. I mean, I have a lot of friends, you know, author friends that hate editing and revising. I just love it. I just love like figuring out just the right words and figuring out how to make things work. And then, yeah, rewriting a scene. I just love writing the scenes because I just get in my characters' heads and truly once, you know, when I'm towards the end of the book, I feel like these characters are like part of me. They're like my friends, they're my family, with my first book, I tried looking for an agent and queried for it, and I exhausted every agent on my list. Came to the LTUE and went to a class on your first page and realized, okay, my first page isn't good enough. And so I did some major revising. I wrote a whole new first beginning and all of that. And I'm trying to remember where I was going with that.
And you stayed motivated and engaged. Yeah.
I did, because, but then once I finished that, the prospect of, like, because I was new at this, I didn't know, and I had already queried on it, and so I thought, well, maybe I need to change my characters' names so that I can kind of put it as a new submission, and I was basically in tears thinking, I cannot rename my characters because this is who they are. So I don't know, I think at least part of my writing process comes from a bit of insanity, I think, because these characters become so real to me.
We are all insane, we spend our days with people who don't exist, and they're more real to us than, our real people. So, Wendy, what do you do? What do you suggest?
So my trick is to break it up into smaller tasks. I'm very much a task-oriented person, a goal person. So especially that very first read-through when you have that sloppy first draft that is a mess, and I wrote a book for Nanowrimo again, and then I usually take off December to catch up on reading, and January I did a bunch of short fiction. So February 1st it's like, okay, here we go, pull out that manuscript. And it is so overwhelming because you know that you have your list there of all the things that need fixed and all of the things that need done, and it can be very overwhelming. And this year was one of those that it took me a while to get into that first revision just because it seems overwhelming. But what I ended up doing was breaking it apart and being like, okay, you know what? I am not going to, go from the beginning to the end, fixing, taking all the time to fix everything. I'm just going to do a read through once, and I'm going to use those nice little brackets. And I'm just gonna, neat new scene here, or fix this thing there, or do that there, or this character needs cut. And breaking it down like that, and just saying, okay, I'm not gonna try to fix it all at once, I'm just going to point out for myself what still needs to be done, and then next I'll go through again and work through those. So it's a little less overwhelming than a little.
And I think that's a really, really good approach, and that's good advice for your friend. The other thing I would say is let it rest. Don't finish the book and then the next day pick it up and start from the beginning. No, you need to be able to come at that book with fresh eyes, and then you're going to fall in love with it again. What you could do is read other books in between. Like she said, I don't know about you all, but when I am writing a book, I don't read fiction because I tend to live in fiction. I mean, I insert myself into stories, and so if I'm trying to, write my story world and I get so involved in somebody else's, it changes my voice. So, you finish the book, you put it aside, you read some really good stuff, and then you go back to it a little bit later. And another thing that I would recommend that I have never actually done, but one of my writer friends swears by this approach. She says you layer in. So the first pass you may say, okay, I'm gonna look for sensory detail. What can I add, what sort of odors could I add at this point? So you just take a pass and layer in sensory detail. Then you take another pass and you layer in something else. And so, approach it as kind of like you're doing. You take one bit at a time. So I think I personally can't imagine doing that, but I think it's a real, do you?
Yes. Oh yeah, I will go through, because once I have my skeleton of the story done, I will go back and I look for places where, okay, I need to describe, better here. I need them to be able to see what's going on, and I try and cover, like the five senses that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I go through and I do that, and then I go through and I make sure that the dialogue sounds right, and I will read it out loud so I can actually hear the dialogue. So yeah, as I go back and do all of that over and again.
And I feel like that's where it's really helpful to plot out, even if you are a pantser, to go back and plot out your story before you start revising it, because then you can see those areas and see, okay, hey, that doesn't quite work, or I've got a lot of, room here that I need to add more tension, And another thing that goes along with that I always do when I'm outlining is make sure that my characters have a goal for each chapter and each scene so that they know what they're working towards.
And that is really good advice. You guys listen to that. I was gonna say, you said you outline after the fact, and so
As I'm going after the fact.
I was sitting here thinking, have I ever done that? No, I don't. And I don't want to make it sound like I, like fire off these books and I never read them again. I mean, I really do send it to my editor, but then you have, you have to read it over and over when the copy editor gives it to you. So I know I'm going to do that. So, but these are mysteries. I mean, I've written a bunch of other kinds of books, and so I do have a revision process. So please, I don't want to sound like a brag. But I've never looked at it after the fact. But I'll tell you, what I did do once was I got an invitation from Harlequin to write a romance. Now I had never written it was a sweet romance. I don't write sex and vampires, otherwise I would be rich and you all would know who I am. But it was a sweet romance, and I thought, I want to do that. I don't even read the stupid things. But I took one of their author's books and I read it and I outlined her book. What has happened here and what is my, and that really helped me. So I can actually see, because it helped me then plot my own book. And yes, I did plot, but I love research. Now that book was fun because it was set in a zoo, and it was a zookeeper's daughter, so I went and worked in the zoo and as a zookeeper assistant. And so, that was a lot of fun, but I knew I had an outline that I was following. It just wasn't my outline.
All right.
So,
Wendy.
So did you add anything from your zoo experience? Did that change the plot?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And if you read, of course, I hate the title. That's what you all want to talk about. You said you can't change a character's name. What many people don't understand is when you write for a traditional publisher, the author has, unless you're probably Brandon Sanderson, I don't know, has no say-so over the title or the cover art.
Yep.
And so to me, I have to have a working title. Anyway, my title was The Zookeeper's Daughter, which I thought was brilliant, and they changed it to A Daughter's Legacy. But if you go and read A Daughter's Legacy, you will meet some really cool, you'll meet African porcupines. I met these African porcupines and fed them and cleaned up the poop. And it did. It absolutely changed my plot because it adds depth to your story. So, okay, there were more questions. Who has another question? What's your question?
So for pantsing, to add a little bit of structure to that, could you foresee at least the major direction of the plot and try and follow that as you go, or is there just no structure at all in that?
So he's asking about this for a total pantser. Is there a structure that you at least have in mind when you start?
I usually have an idea of what the climax is going to look like, but it doesn't always actually get to that. Sometimes that can change, but one thing she was saying, my latest book, Beauty and the Horseman's Head, is like a Beauty and the Beast story with a girl with the head of the Headless Horseman, and I kind of did follow the Beauty and the Beast Disney version, kind of that type of characters, and
So you knew
so I
an
kind of
overall
knew.
plot. Okay.
Now it
there you
did
go.
change a bit, and it did get further away from
Well, that makes it
but that
yours.
was the starting point.
That makes it yours.
As far as what I know ahead of time when I start a story, I tend to have the inciting incident, so the major first thing that changes, and then I will have ideas. I'll have enough of a scenario and a premise that I can have a list of a couple ideas of plot twists. Of okay, this is going to be a surprise for the main character that I know going into this, but they don't. And so I have a couple ideas that I can pick and choose from and see which ones end up working out best that I think of ahead of time based on the setting, the character, the premise.
Okay. Good. There was a question over here. Yeah.
So I am also kind of somewhere in the middle of the spectrum when it comes to just pantsing and plotting.
You're a hybrid.
I'm a hybrid, yes. But the thing that I find I struggle with is I will have events and moments planned out that I want to have and see. I know what's supposed to be happening in a given chapter, but then I get stuck on how to go about writing that actual thing. That's the part I'm typically pantsing on, is the actual how does this go down. And yeah, I just often get stuck on the, I know what's supposed to happen, but how do I get into it?
So the question is, she has an idea of the plot points and what's supposed to happen, but often it's discovery writing to actually make that happen. Any advice?
I would be the same. I'm the same way. Like if I have too much, like there was my second book that I released. I had a scene in it that I absolutely wanted in the book because I thought it was the most amazing scene. So I kind of forced it in there, and my beta readers told me, and they said, well, a couple of them said, this scene doesn't really fit the rest of the story. And so after hearing that a couple times, I looked at it again and I thought, would it change the story at all if I just took it out? And it didn't. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take that out of there. But yeah, when I do have like scenes that I want to put in there, a lot of times they don't work out.
The advice that I have heard is skip the boring stuff. So if you know, okay, somewhere in here I want, coming up soon here, I want a scene that there's, a fire in the hotel. Because my writing, I tend to have a lot of things catch on fire. Instead of worrying about, okay, how am I going to get my characters there, or how am I going to do this, if I'm stuck like that, I just start out with, okay, they're there, the fire's starting, and then I can, either work backwards and try to figure out, as it goes on, have the characters, in dialogues, bring in how they got there or what they're doing there, bring in some of the backstory that way. Or then with that discovery writing, you end up, if you don't need those scenes in between, then you don't need them. So, and then it's better just to skip them anyways.
And I would say, number one, take a walk. Yeah. If you're sitting there and you are just totally stuck, get up, get away from it, take a walk, write an email, do something to get your mind off of it, and maybe the next day or when you get back to it sometimes it just, your subconscious starts to work and it just comes together. And and then if you're not me, you might skip that, go to the next scene, just put something in parentheses.
Your brackets.
I do actually do this. I will put in brackets or parentheses, Ginny, look up blah blah blah, because I need some sort of reference or something, and then I'll go back and do it later. So skip it and then come back to it. So did that help?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, what else? Yes.
Good craft books or outlets for you that are unique to mystery writing?
When I got my first mystery contract, it was a really fun story. I was at a convention and I was sitting beside a New York editor for lunch, and I had written 2 chick lit books that had been published. And she said, "We're actively acquiring cozy mysteries." And I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck, cozy mysteries? Sure, I love Agatha Christie. I bet I could do that. I could do a mystery. And we were eating chicken with mushroom sauce. And I have a friend who's a mushroom hunter. She had been called to the ER a couple of weeks before to consult on a case of mushroom poisoning. So I'm sitting there eating, and when we stood up, I turned around and said, hey, I got an idea for a cozy. What if there's a kitchen klutz who tries to impress people by making a casserole, and she takes it to the church potluck, and somebody plants poisonous mushrooms in it to kill a gossipy old lady. And she said, I like it, send it to me. Well, I didn't have it. I mean, that was it. I didn't even have a sentence, I checked out a book called Writing the Modern Mystery by Barbara Norville. And I read that book. We're writers and we're readers. We read books on how to write. Yeah, that was it. It really helped me put structure around that. And that was my first cozy mystery. It was called Murder by Mushroom. They kept my title. Did you have something to say, Wendy?
I do.
Okay.
So my favorite plotting book to recommend, especially for pantsers, is Beginnings, Middles, and Ends by Nancy Kress. Because that's one that is...
Love Nancy Kress.
Yeah. It is awesome, and it's one of those that it made a lot of things click in my head as a pantser that all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, that's what I need there, or that's why that character needs to have this thing shown early on, you know, and it breaks it up into, you know, basically the beginning, so the first couple chapters, the first act, and then, you know, the middle part, and then the end, and it still allows enough breathability that it's not one of those that's like strict, you have to do it this way, and on chapter 2, page 14, you'd better have, you know, this character say something about this other character. You know, it allows a lot of flexibility.
Who was the author?
Nancy Kress. Breathability is a great term. And, you know, and we make it sound like we have our spreadsheets and we follow you mentioned the hero's journey, which is fabulous, and I have followed that in the past. I tend not to anymore. I don't know why, maybe it's just ingrained, but I can't imagine going through and saying, okay, here is the inciting incident, here is this, I can't imagine that, but.
See, and that's one of the reasons that I have both of those on there. The hero's journey tends to be more plot focused, whereas Save the Cat is more character arc focused. So if I know that I'm stuck and I'm like, I don't know where the plot is going next, I can look at that side, and if the character is stagnant, I can look and see on that side.
So the question is, her characters go off on their own and do their own thing, so how does she accomplish the end of the book that she intended for it to be? That is a really good question, and you know what that tells me? It tells me you have a really good book, and you have a very creative mind, and my advice would be, let your character go for a bit, but then to me, one of the hardest things as a writer to do is to force your characters. You are the boss. You really are the boss. I wrote a book once where it was, and it was not a romance, but these two characters, they really, really wanted to be intimate with each other. And I really did not want them to be intimate with each other. This was not something that was part of this book. And you know what I did? I wrote the scene, and then I cut it. and it got it out of my system. What do you suggest?
Yeah, well, it's truly, you do have power, you know, over your book. I kind of wrote a scene I cut too, but this one I was on a power trip, and I killed off my main character. And then I'm like, no, I can't do that. So I scrapped it and I started writing. But yeah, if your characters are really, you know, you've got to stay true to your characters, in my opinion. So if they're not going to end up going to that, trying to force it will just,
It'll feel forced.
Yeah, it'll feel forced. So you need to follow. So you might need to figure out a new climax or a new direction. So yeah, sometimes you have to, I guess, kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings, yeah.
Also, it can be an awesome opportunity to find more roadblocks for your characters. Of like, okay, my character keeps wanting to go to Florida. You know, what can I put in their way so that is no longer an option for them?
Very good. Okay, we have like 2.5 minutes, so it's gonna have a really quick. He's telling me we don't have any more time. Okay, can we say goodbye?
Yes.
Okay, I want our Holly and Wendy to tell us what they're hawking at this convention. Tell us about your latest book and where we can find it.
All right, so I've got a bunch of short stories online at wendynikel.com. You can find links to those. And then I also have a time travel novella series from World Weaver Press. So those are over in the dealer room for a very limited time because I'm heading out of here soon. But I do also have free bookmarks that have the information on there about it. So please come up and get some swag.
Okay. And my series I've got the Rising series, I've got the Curse from the Fountain of Youth series. They're both available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble also. And you can find me at authorhollykelly.com.
And I am, and what's your email, what's your website?
WendyNikel.com.
WendyNikel.com, and I am virginiasmith.org. You guys have been great, and aren't they awesome? They're awesome. Thank you. Thank you.